be live. Yep, going live, and you're live. Just in time for the helicopter to go over. In case anybody wanted to hear a helicopter. They're pretty cool. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, welcome all 0 of you.
No, Stephen LeBron is here.
Oh, Stephen LeBron, welcome.
He's not nobody.
I don't know, that thing says 0 views. That's all I can see.
It says there's 2 viewers here.
Oh, okay. Can you switch back to OBS again so I can see what I'm doing? So, as you can see, we have an awkwardly censored piece of reference. We were going for like more minimal censoring, but YouTube does not approve, apparently, of the minimal censor approach. So we're going to draw some stuff. Actually, no, here, I'll do what I usually do, which is, I don't know why I do this, but I'll show you what I just filmed earlier. This is for my fundamental head drawing class. And we're just basically going over simple head construction, you know, and how to break the head down, work from big shapes down to small shapes, find the thirds, the center line, you know, the three-dimensional structure of the head, all that. And we just did like a simple like front view, three-quarter view, although that one got a little bit complicated, and then like a side view. Just in case anybody's curious. Also, if you're in that class, if you are in the fundamental head class, this is being uploaded right now. I haven't actually released this yet, but it's being uploaded and it should be done, I think, by the time the stream's over. And so as soon as the live stream's over, I'll get that thing posted to the website. There was also this that I drew for the figure drawing class. See the whole thing here? There we go. Oh, the head really disappears there in the light. Anyway, that is the idea. So, as you can see, we're going to be doing a figure drawing today. More of a back pose this time. I don't know. In fact, this is actually one that I drew for a live stream a long, long time ago. And I did not do a very good job. And so I kind of wanted to try it again. So it was like one of our first, I think we did like an Instagram live stream back then. And this was one of our first attempts, or my first attempt at a live stream. It was okay. It got a lot of critical comments once I posted the drawing on Instagram, but that happens. So we're going to try it again. So we're going to start with kind of marking where I want the top of the drawing to be, which is up here. And where I want the bottom of the drawing to be. It's going to be roughly about here. And keep in mind, if you're more advanced, you don't really have to do this part. I do it just mostly out of habit because I'm always teaching. And it's a good way to get things started if you're unsure exactly how to start. I measure these, but my pencil isn't long enough. Shift this up just a little bit, maybe. Right, so we've got our halfway point. I'm going to grab a longer pencil for measuring purposes. See if we can figure out there to there, there to there. That looks pretty good. Okay, so we got top, bottom, halfway. And right now this has nothing to do with the figure, really. This is literally just 3 marks, 2 marks, and then 1 right in the middle. And then I'm going to lean over to the reference here and figure out where the halfway point is in the reference photo on the model, but not the anatomical halfway point. It's going to be more like the actual, like the literal halfway point. You know, so I'm just going to lean over here, say from bottom of the foot to there. It's roughly about the bottom of the glute, the bottom of the left gluteus maximus, I guess is how I would describe it. I mean, basically the bottom of the left butt cheek is where that halfway point's going to be. You guys can't quite see it because I had to censor that part, but that's where that halfway point is. And then I'm just going to measure real quick how many heads down to that halfway point. Now, this is tough because we can't see her whole head. A lot of it's hidden behind her shoulders, and it's a little tricky. But I'm just going to measure like kind of from the top of her head to where the shoulder is, I guess. I don't know. Just do my best. Keep in mind, this is just to get things started. 1, 2, almost like 4.5 down to there. 1, 2, 3. Let's say 4.5 heads down to that halfway point. So we can just kind of mark real quick. Just take our best guess here and say we've got 1, 2, 4. Nope, smaller. 1, 2, 3. I don't know, that's pretty close. Go a tiny, tiny bit smaller, but I think that should be good. So that head, I mean, that seems tiny, right? But the truth is her head's actually going behind her shoulders, so we're not really seeing the entire head. What I'm really doing is using this to figure out where these shoulders should go. And they're going to be sweeping across here at an angle, something like this, like a pretty extreme angle. And, you know, kind of double check, see what this angle is like compared to the reference. Seems reasonably close. Reference might be a little more angled over on this side. Right, and then we need to get a head shape on here, which in this case, again, I mean, if I'm being honest, I'm just kind of taking my best guess here at this point, because this is not an easy head position to draw. Right, it's kind of coming back up around this way, wrapping probably around here, and probably swooping down kind of like that, if we could see the whole head, but we can't. Right, and then her neck is kind of coming and swooping back in this way. And kind of up here a little bit. Right, so really her neck is kind of doing this. Clean that up a little bit. That's not bad. I don't mind this. So that gives us something to start with, right? Something that we can build on and compare things to and stuff like that. So let's see here. The next question is this is our halfway point. I feel like I may have drawn this section a little bit large, but I don't know. We'll see. If this is the halfway point, this is going to be like the bottom of the glute, right? Which means our glutes are going to be somewhere kind of like in this area, which makes sense, actually. That might work. Yeah. I think that seems pretty good. Let's see. So then we're going to have the spine, right? So let's find a quick little center line here. We can start working out our gesture, right? So we've got spine kind of wrapping around this way. We've got it dropping down this direction. And then it suddenly swings back out like this way, right? Kind of like that. Get rid of this real quick. From here, we need to look for the gesture, right? So her shoulder is going to sit kind of out here, I would say. Don't want it to go out too far. And then we don't have a lot of her back showing on this side of her spine. It's just a little bit. Right, so this part's going to kind of swing back in this way. Right, so we need to think about our gesture a little bit and what's going on with the torso. There's a lot of different ways to do torso gesture. The way I've been doing it lately is kind of going for a mix of things, but really kind of focusing on like what an animation I think they would consider like a flower sack or something, right? Which in this case would be like this, right? And then we would get this part kind of coming in here, and then this part kind of coming back out this way. That would kind of be our flower sack type shape. And then since, like normally if we were seeing her from the front, this would be going like that way, but we're not. We're seeing her from the back, so it's going to flip around and get the spine kind of like more like this. And then glutes kind of like down in here. So that's kind of the shape I'm thinking of when I look for what's going on with this gesture, right? So we need to figure out, now her arm's blocking like this upper part of our gesture. So I'm just going to guess basically and just say, okay, I think it's going to come down this way. Right, kind of like this. This back part's going to pop back out here. Right, kind of like that, and then it's going to hit down this way. Pretty close. This halfway point that I marked, not quite lining up, but pretty close. We might need to shift this up a little bit, maybe to about there. Right, and so we're just focused on gesture, really simple gesture, hopefully. We can get the legs in here before we do too much more. Right, so we're going to have this leg kind of coming down from roughly up here somewhere. Might even be helpful to put some structure in the lower section of the torso, right? Because it's very clear. She has a very clear, like, boxy type shape going on up in here. And that's going to actually help us kind of figure out how to connect the legs. Right, so this box is like up in here. Right, kind of like that. We can see rib cage up in here. You know, and she's sort of short-waisted a little bit. So we're going to probably have some overlap between these two things. Man, just the ability to draw nice circles and ovals, I can't tell you enough how important that is. So that's starting to seem about right. You know, so again, now once we have the box in place, we can kind of see where the sacrum is going to go, right? Kind of like back over here. And if that's our sacrum, then our glutes are going to attach right about here. And this one's ending up just about right where I had it earlier, surprisingly. I just guessed earlier, but seems about right. Get really careful with my line work, right? Keeping with the idea of C curves, S curves, and straights. And that is it. Those are the only marks we're going to make. Pushing this the other way, if you look at the reference, this line looks like it goes like this a little bit. But we're going to push that around the other direction just to help show the perspective more, because that leg's coming out towards us. And so if we push that glute muscle to wrap around the cylindrical form of the leg, it'll help show that that leg is coming out towards us more, you know, and it just looks cool. So let's see here. So we're gonna have this leg dropping down this way and complete our gesture here. Also, we get the knee This is tough. So how do we know where this knee goes? Honestly, that's kind of a hard one to figure out. What I'm going to do is draw this other leg first. And then I'm going to use this leg to reference where this one should go. And what I'm going to do first is figure out where the foot should go. I think that'll be helpful, right? So the foot kind of aligns, ankle sits like outside this glute section back here, right? So we just drop a quick plumb line in there. I know the foot's going to sit like on this side of that line, right? So we're going to basically get a big S curve coming in this way, dropping back down this way, and this should, in theory, lead right back to that ankle and kind of pop back out here. And this foot's kind of coming back like this direction, and some toes back up in here. Bottom of the foot's going to be like back up in here. Right, really trying to think of this as like a box, you know, and then we can come in here and kind of complete our gesture. Right, kind of coming down that way. I feel like this ankle could sit a little bit lower. All right, and then the heel is going to like pop out this direction now. Feet are tough. This is not an easy thing to draw. So I've been doing this a while. So hopefully I can do it. But truthfully, drawing feet like this takes a lot of practice. Just happened to have done a lot of practice. And you can see what I'm doing, right? I'm developing the boxy structure of the foot. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. I mean, I don't want to make it sound like it's like super difficult. It's just needs to be done very carefully. All right, so we kind of get that foot down in there. Right now it looks very boxy, and that's the point. And then later, as we work back through this a second pass, we can come in here and add more details and change things and do a whole bunch of interesting stuff. That ankle should be right about there. You know, and then we have to think like, okay, is this foot a good size, right? Because like I just spent a lot of time really focused on that foot. And now there we go. But yeah, I think it's a fine size. I think it works. To be honest, it might be a tiny bit big, but I feel like it fits and reads pretty well. We just might need to make it a little more narrow, maybe like in here.
Can I give you a question to answer?
You can give me a question, yes.
All right. So this is from Stephen LeBron from
Okay.
earlier.
Oh yeah, Stephen.
He says, hi Brian, question. I've been using cross-hatching for shading, but my cross-hatching seems overworked to me. Any tips for the right amount of cross-hatching?
Cross-hatching is a tough one because, you know, a lot of that is just personal preference in terms of how much cross-hatching to include. My recommendation would be to, to do some master studies. I think would be the way to go to figure out cross-hatching stuff. Because master studies, you know, they'll give you a chance to see how other people do cross-hatching. And you can go look at like the old master types, you know, like Charles Dana Gibson and those guys. Montgomery Flagg. Who's the other one? Something Cole? I don't know. I've got a bunch of their books back here. There's those guys, right? But then there's also the more modern, like cross-hatching inker types, like David Finch or somebody like that, you know, that has a lot of material out there that you can watch and study from, or literally any comic book person, pretty much. I would recommend looking at those. Would be and start trying to identify like what are they doing that you're not. Do some studies, copy their drawings as carefully as you can, figure out what they're doing with the hatching. What it really comes down to is figuring out a light source. And then when you see me do stuff, like I work a little bit more tonally. And so I work with like soft edges and hard edges and everything in between, but I'm doing it with charcoal. It's basically the same thing. You're just using a different language to describe those edges, you know, in terms of hatching. And so it follows all the same rules. The soft edges need to be where the soft edges are. The hard edges need to be where the hard edges are. It's just how you describe them is different when you do it with ink or line or whatever. So I don't know. My recommendation would be do some master studies, definitely. And if you can get really good at copying that type of stuff, you know, like getting really good at copying like a David Finch drawing or something, then life will be much easier. Yeah, I don't know. That'd be my recommendation, I think. Inking's fun though. I like inking. It's hard. Falls in the hard but fun category. Okay, so I'm trying to figure out where to place this other leg. Right? Part of what I'm looking for is like how big is this negative shape right here? You know, it needs to be like maybe this size negative shape. So we need to make sure this leg fits in here in a way that reinforces that negative shape. So I'm going to say kind of like this, and then the foot is kind of like being pulled up, right? Like she's like, I don't know, I can't do it with my hand, but she's doing this with her foot, like kind of like angling it upward. You know, so the ankle stops about here, and then we get foot kind of coming up this way a little bit. All right, we're getting like that kind of shape. And what's tricky here is right now, this feels small compared to everything else, but really what's happening is it's going away from us, you know, and so we need to figure out how exactly to get that to read. Also, how to get this foot to read. This is a tough foot right here. It's not bad. It feels a little large, but I'm going to leave it for now. And let's see if we can get this arm on here, right? Pretty simple gesture for that arm. It's very straight. I mean, it's basically just swooping down this way, right? Nothing too complex there. Same thing over here. It's kind of coming in like this. Right, kind of doing that. And it's not bad. Now, we need to get the chair on here. The chair is a very important part of this pose. And to be honest, that's partly why I chose this pose. Just partly. But I wanted to draw a chair. I don't know why. I just did. So just looking for her hip and kind of where this chair is aligning. It's kind of coming out this way. And then down here, her leg is like kind of pressed up against the chair. This is tricky. So we get partly chair running right along here. In fact, this part of the chair that she's leaned on, it's almost totally flat from this perspective, right? Because that must be like close to where the height of the camera was when I took to the photo. So what we can do is kind of push. In fact, I'm going to push the perspective just a little tiny bit because I think that'll help. Okay, so we get part of the chair coming down here. This other part of the chair comes past her knee a bit and then down this way. Unfortunately, there's no quick way to draw a good chair. It just takes a little while. You just got to figure out the perspective. Get really good at drawing very straight lines, as you can see. I mean, if you can't do that, this is going to be really tough. Right, other side of the chair is back in here. You know, work out the perspective. This is basically the bottom of the chair, kind of coming back this way now. And back this direction. It's okay. It's not perfect. I could measure these and really kind of figure it out, but I don't know. Don't have that kind of time right now. The idea is to get good enough at this that you can fake it and make it look convincing, which is really kind of what I'm going for. And then this part's going to go back to this part of the chair. It kind of leans back. And let's maybe angle this a little bit more. This feels a little too flat. It's not bad. I think that's a good start for our chair. Good enough for now. Good enough that I can get this hand placed, which is kind of why I started working on the chair. Right, so this arm's coming down, connecting to the wrist, kind of down here, and then the hand kind of pops out, sort of grabs onto the chair here. A little bit of overlap here, perhaps. A little bit of finger out there. I don't know, this isn't the... It's kind of an awkward angle to draw a hand from. But it's basically doing something like that. I don't know, it's just grabbing on there. We see a little bit of her other hand, but I don't know that we need to put that in. It's kind of in an awkward position. Just in terms of like how it lines up with the rest of her body and stuff, it feels a little bit awkward. I don't think we need it there for the pose to read. So I would leave that other hand out. And yeah, that's pretty much it. We can get a little bit of the boxy shape of this foot on here maybe. We're seeing just like a little bit of the top plane of the foot here. I don't know, seems pretty good. Good enough, I think. Yeah, I think that reads pretty well. So next stage, right? Let's get some more structure on here and figure out what's going on with all these limbs, right? We've got this arm going away from us and it's a little wider up here, right? And then we get the elbow around this level, other side of the elbow about here, and then we have the forearm kind of like down here. To be honest, that arm might be a little bit long. Feels a little long right now, but I think once we add some anatomy on there, it might be fine. Let's see if we can find... Let's see, we got this boxy shape on here. Right, that's going to help us figure out where the hip is going to sit. So we're going to have the abs kind of like drop. Abs or like oblique, I guess I should say, probably not abs. But we'll have like a little bit of rib cage, right? And then oblique kind of popping out here and connecting back in to here. right? We're also looking up at her torso quite a bit here. You know, so we're kind of seeing this like rounded form across here. And even more so up around here. You know, if we're just thinking about the perspective that we're seeing this from, that's kind of what I would be looking at. Okay, so then this leg is going away from us, right? Because right now it feels a little small, but if we suddenly do this and start figuring out some of that perspective that's going on here, the whole thing is going to feel a little bit better. You know, and then we get that calf up in here, kind of getting compressed into here. Right, kind of coming out that way. This again is coming back out towards us, right? Kind of like this. Yeah, we can add a little bit more knee on here. Kind of right up in there. Right, we have this leg definitely coming back towards us. This direction and back through here. And then kind of lock this down a little bit better, maybe this shape. I think that's starting to look pretty good. Yeah. So I'm going to actually snap a photo of this real quick. Actually, no, I'm going to draw a little bit more. Let's add a little bit of anatomy on here. I got a little bit, right? There's a few anatomical indications here or there, but I think we could add more. And yeah, this hand feels too big. That's part of what's going on. This hand's way too big, right? This needs to be smaller. A little more like that, maybe. And let's find some anatomy, right? So let's zoom back in here. See if we can start looking for what's going on with his arm, right? So we have our shoulder wrapping around this way, and then our tricep popping out, kind of around here, coming out from underneath there, right? Kind of wraps around, and then we get kind of like this flat spot in here down to the forearm. Just going to kind of pop back out this way just a little bit. Come down here, and I can already tell this arm is definitely too long. So we're going to have to change it. A good example of why we want to draw with really, really simple lines, right? Because if we draw with complex lines, our tendency will be to not want to change things, right? Because we'll spend a lot of time on things, and we'll kind of have a tendency to not change things that need to be changed, such as this hand, right? But fortunately, all I have for this arm is just two lines and some little like arcs, and that's it, right? So like it's not going to be difficult to change. It's going to be relatively simple to change. The only downside is I've ended up with some eraser marks here that are unfortunate, but not the end of the world either. So that seems better. That seems like a much better arm length, right? And so now her arm is kind of being compressed up into this area and then kind of dropping down this way, kind of being compressed up against her torso a bit. And then it kind of get a little bit of bone popping out on this side, and then we get some flexors, or sorry, yeah, flexors over here. Kind of doing that. You know, this elbow is like kind of like right up in here. You know, we get something shaped about like that. And then we'll find, just real quick here, like the, I don't know, maybe a little bit of her jaw right up in here. And find a nice sweep to the shoulders, which we've basically already found. Let's kind of refine it a little bit. See if we can add some of this shoulder shape on here, because it's kind of wrapping around this way and then locking onto this section. And then we're getting a little bit of like rib cage shape up in here, right? Kind of like that. And then some compression happening. We have to decide, right? Like how much of this compression do we want to include? I would put a little bit at least. All right, get that little bit of compression up in there. Leads down to the glutes. You know, if we want to, we could go so far as to also find like the scapula and stuff. Like this scapula is getting pulled around the other side. This one's probably kind of more like this. But they're not super visible, to be honest, which is kind of why I didn't spend too much time on them. You know, kind of sitting up around in that area. This part looks pretty good, right? So we've got some rib cage coming down, some oblique, and then we're seeing a little bit of the breast right up in here. Just a little bit. And that's good to include because that creates more overlaps, right? And shows more depth. You know, overlap is something that I'm always super, super focused on. And you can see everywhere we're pushing these overlaps, right in here, here, a little bit right there, definitely here and here, right here. Like that, every single one of those overlaps adds a ton of depth, right? But you have to be really careful. You can't just do them arbitrarily. They have to be guided by anatomy and the pose and you know, where there's compression and where there's not. You know, so they have to be very carefully kind of inserted into the drawing. But if you can do it, it adds a lot, right? It really makes things more three-dimensional. And also what I'm going to do is we started with a box here, right, for our hip section. And that works really well from the front. But the truth is from the back of the hips are more rounded. The front of the hips are more boxy. The back of the hips are more rounded. So this will help us get everything placed, but then I'll probably come in here and kind of round this out a little bit. Because that is a little bit more what that back hip section is actually like. It's more rounded. Right, and then that brings us down to glutes. And like I was saying before, this gives us an opportunity for more overlap right in here. and then I'm pushing the direction of this connection point the other way. Right? We don't want to do it too much. Keep it subtle, but make sure that it's rounding around the leg. And it's tricky because a lot of the time, and certainly in this case, like it looks like it's going the other direction in the reference, and it is, but I'm going to change it. So it's not doing that because it's a drawing. And with drawings, that is one of the things we can do is change stuff. Oh, also, I'm going to drink this delicious Coca-Cola that I almost forgot about. Yum. Okay, back to work. So as we work our way down, right, then we can add a little bit of leg muscle, right, which in this case is probably mostly the lateralis, kind of popping out this way a bit. Right, it's going to wrap around here, and then it's going to have a little bit of this knee kind of poke out after it, and then we get this kind of like squared off knee section. Right, and then from there, get a little bit of hamstring. It's tricky, to be honest. This area right here doesn't line up exactly like it does in the reference. That's not that big a deal. It's pretty close. I feel like it reads pretty well as a drawing. Keep in mind, our goal isn't to copy the reference, right? Like it is to an extent in terms of like lighting and the pose and the general proportions. But at the end of the day, like if you look at the lines I'm putting in, like none of that is really there. It's kind of more, you know, I'm creating like a version of it that exists specifically to work as a drawing, you know, because drawings follow different rules than reality. Reality is complicated. So complicated that if we were to try and copy it exactly, probably wouldn't be all that great. I feel like we can make this calf bigger. It feels small. And to be honest, again, this is another example where when I look at the reference and compare it to my drawing, it feels about right. But when I just look at the drawing, it feels a little bit small. So I'm going to make it bigger. It's my drawing, so I can, oh, excuse me, do that if I want. That seems way better. I don't know. I mean, if you look at the whole thing, I think that reads way better as a calf than it did a second ago. And again, a good example of not really matching the reference, but that's okay. Again, like we're trying to create a good drawing, not a good copy, you know? So that brings us to our last leg here. And let's see, we're going to have some of this, some like adductors maybe kind of coming in this way. This is a tricky leg. Think about this for a second. Kind of doing that maybe. Right, and then we can get a little bit of, again, some hamstring in here, kind of coming down that way. We get kind of the more tendinous, bony area back in here. And notice, if we got that gesture established properly, that's acting as a guide, right? Like notice I'm kind of working and then locking back into the gesture in areas. Same thing up here, right? Like I was adding this, locking back into the gesture, right? Adding this, locking back into the gesture. And for that to work, the gesture has to be super, super accurate. And it's not the easiest thing to do, but with practice, you can definitely do it. Okay, calf is going to pop out this way and back in a little bit here, and then we get the soleus underneath there, kind of locking back into our gesture again. right? And then when the other side of the calf comes out like over here, it kind of pops back around this way, and then we get soleus back underneath there again. And then that little bit of leg that sticks out right here, or bone, that is matching up with our initial gesture, right? So we kind of like add things and deviate from the gesture and then always end up back where it started, is the idea. A little bit of calf shape on there maybe. Calf really has like two sections to it. It's kind of a complicated thing, actually. Back of the legs kind of running up in there. This looks really confusing because I'm just drawing right on top of that foot. But that's fine. So we can just erase that back out. Get rid of our construction lines, and it all kind of goes back to making more sense. I'm liking this. It's a little too angular. Doesn't quite feel like her leg. So I'm just going to kind of pull it back around that way maybe. I don't know. It seems pretty good. This will make more sense when we put a shadow pattern on it. It's not bad. This foot still feels a little bit long, but I think we can just end it a little bit shorter and just say, that's the end of the toe right there. And that pretty much fixes it. Nothing too complicated. So what time is it? It's been almost an hour. I'm going to actually snap a photo of this real quick. Although, to be honest, this calf still bothers me. I don't know if I want to photograph it yet. I'll round it out a little bit more here. Yeah, this seems better. What's up? What? Nothing? Okay. Just kind of continuing to find that perspective on here. Round things out, make it a little bit more foot-like. You know, remember, it started out super boxy, but the more we work on it, the more it'll turn into like an actual foot. You know, we've got to start with the boxiness to make sure that it reads three-dimensionally and it sits in space properly. But that's not bad. Okay, so I'm going to snap a photo of this real quick here. So we're going to take a short break. And let's see. Let's do this. What is happening? Sorry, guys, I'm not the fastest photo taker. Also, I got this new camera, or new phone, and it is terrible at photographing drawings. Don't know why exactly, but for some reason, like the auto settings, they just can't do it well. I don't know why, really. So I have to go into like pro mode and kind of like mess around with it a whole bunch until I get it looking the way I want. But man, it's a pain. You're always adjusting ISO and shutter speeds and whatever else they got on there. Let's see here. That looks pretty good. Let's get a couple close-ups and then we'll keep going. I think that works. Okay, so what do we do next? Oh, the next thing we do is wake my computer up because I went to sleep. There we go. There's a couple things we can do. We can add some hair. That might be good, and an ear. And then we can add some shadow pattern on here and see if we can get this thing working a little bit better. And then if I have time at the very end, I'll flesh out more of this chair. But chairs, they're tricky. They just take some time, right? I don't want to spend this whole demo just drawing a chair. I don't know how exciting that would be. But as you can see, I have like the scaffolding for the chair down, at least. So she's not just floating and looking awkward. So let's see if we can come in here and start with a little bit of hair. How about that? That might be cool. I usually don't draw hair because it takes time. And okay, so her ear is like right back up around here. And it's kind of making a pretty narrow shape because we're looking at it from an angle like the side basically. And then her hair coming around this way, wrapping up behind here a little bit. Some of it is going over her ear. Also, I'm looking and thinking like maybe I made the neck too wide. It's a possibility because her hair clearly goes over the ear, right this way, and then kind of wraps back around here. And I feel like it's hitting her neck more like around here. I'm just going to pull that neck shape in just a little bit. That's a little better. Okay, then that hair shape is going to pop kind of back up this way. And it gets kind of pointy up here a little bit. And then it's going to kind of drop down like this. And then we'll get a little bit more popping out this way. Add a little bit of interesting shape to it maybe. It kind of wraps around over there. Get rid of some of these construction lines. I'm not liking that line. That's not working well. Let's try that again. It's tough because how do we simplify that down into C curves, S curves, and straights when it's doing something kind of complicated? I think what we're going to do is just really simplify it. Just say, okay, it's cutting across the ear and then wrapping back this way and just make it a nice simple S curve, you know, and then we'll kind of include, again, a little bit more of it, a little bit of the top of the ear. I'm not going to say this is the best hair I've ever drawn, but it's okay. I think it's a start. rest of that head shape on there. His hair could be even taller, maybe. Just put simple indications to kind of indicate like where the direction of the hair, right? Like this is coming up and wrapping up and around the ear this way. It's kind of coming out this direction a bit, right? We've got this stuff up here wrapping back around here, here. And since we're up here, actually, this might be a good time to just start mapping things, right? Because we have a pretty clear shadow pattern along here where it's going to kind of run down this way, kind of down around this way, kind of pops back up a little bit, back down a little bit, and then follows out across this little piece over here, right? And then we get another piece of hair indication or shadow indication. You can see what I'm doing. I'm building around that highlight. There's a giant highlight right here. I'm kind of working my way around it with really soft edges. You know, kind of like that. Then we can come in here and just kind of loosely link this stuff together and just say, okay, we've got hair running up around this way, across here, little smaller indications. You know, it's just a nice loose indication. So when we go to render it, we just know like, oh, okay, this section down here gets filled in. This section up here gets filled in. This, we'll just add a nice gradient to it, and it should all just kind of turn into hair pretty quick. Shouldn't be anything too complex. Oh, that's getting way too complicated. I just want to show just a little bit of overlap up in here. Just get a little bit of hair indication. So it's not just like a solid outline. Of course, as I say that, I end up making an outline. Keep the contour of the hair, right? Like that outer contour, pretty soft for the most part, right? And then occasionally just add like some little line work, maybe like right in here where there's like some little overlaps. But that's about it. The rest of that I want to keep very soft if I can. Okay, I'm gonna stop messing with that. This is going on way too long. But if you want to know how I would set this up to be rendered, that's pretty much it. Right, and then we have a little bit of shadow right in here where her neck is kind of meeting her jaw, right? Just a little bit, even less than I put there actually. Shrink that a little bit. A little bit of shadow behind her ear, right? We get kind of some shadow down here, and then the ear is casting a shadow onto her neck back here, right? Kind of like back up in there, right? So there's going to be some shadow in there. We're going to have, I don't know, that's pretty good, I think, for the hair. I think it is good enough. So we'll keep working our way down, right? This is tough, right? So these back poses are kind of a challenge, especially when we get into adding a shadow pattern, right? Because then it's really helpful to know the anatomy, but I didn't intend for this to be like a full anatomy thing, right? So I'm gonna have to move through this a little bit quick, but just know that the more you study back anatomy, the more sense this will make. So we basically have some of the trapezius up in here. It's kind of cutting across this way towards the bottom of the scapula, picking up maybe a little bit of like latissimus shadow in here. You notice it kind of rounds around towards where the lat cuts across. And on the back side here, I'm going to go more with a harder type edge to show where that form's kind of stopping, and then it's going to kind of soften up here as it works its way down. You know, on this side, we're just picking up like a little bit of shadow across the trapezius maybe. And that is a tough area, right? Like what's going on here in the reference, it's not clear at all. So I'm going to make it clear by kind of following those little anatomical indications I put down real quick earlier. I'm just going to make it kind of like that. This would all be shadow back in here, shadow down here, but we're working our way up to that. Now the question is, do we want this to link all the way across into this shadow, or do we want a little area of light right in there? I don't know. Let's see what happens. Let's start over here. All right, this is going to kind of cut across, down a little bit, kind of across this way, across the, I don't know, teres major maybe, or infraspinatus or something. Kind of cuts across this way, cuts back in this direction, and then we get kind of like a harder edge down here. Even though it doesn't look like that in the reference, I'm going to put a little bit harder edge right there. And I kind of like the idea of leaving this open a little bit right here, just letting a little bit of light through there. I think that's a good idea. From there, we get a cast shadow from the arm onto the torso, right? And that's basically just wrapping around this way, right? Kind of like that. And then that's kind of turning back into a little form shadow right in here. All right, we pick up just that little bit of shadow right in there. All right, down in here, I'm going to say this is going to kind of cut back this direction, but keep it nice and soft. And then we get basically like latissimus and ribcage type shadow across here, right? So it's going to kind of be really soft and come out this direction. And then it's going to kind of get pulled back this way. Again, super soft, right? Very rounded forms. And then kind of right where I put this line, right in here, is where that compression is occurring. And we're starting to see a little bit of a harder edge in here. We're picking up a little bit of shadow across here. Kind of pops back out this way a little bit. And back around this way. I don't know, there's a little bit of shadow like on her sacrum right there, but it's pretty subtle. I don't know. How much of that we really need to put in. Also, I'm going to come back up here and just adjust the shape of the trapezius and just add a little bit of trapezius and shoulder separation. Just ever so slightly. It's not bad. I can tell already that this stuff could be a little bit higher, but I think I drew her torso a little bit shorter than it is in the reference. But again, it doesn't really bother me. Like as a drawing, I think it works reasonably well. It just doesn't necessarily match the reference perfectly, but I don't know. I don't think that's the end of the world. Again, remember our goal is to make a nice drawing first. And then if it's a specific assignment, like somebody hires you to draw a specific person, then yeah, I mean, you're going to have to spend a little more time on likeness and type and stuff. But if you're just drawing a cool drawing, you just got to make sure it reads properly. A little bit of shadow here on the arm. All right, it's kind of dropping down this way, and then we're hitting the tricep. Tough. How do we want to indicate that? I'm going to do this. I think this is going to work. I'm going to do that. And it's going to kind of cut back in a little bit. We get a harder edge up underneath here. Drops down kind of along that medial tricep head. And then we're picking up just a little bit of shadow up in here. And then you get a little bit of like elbow down in this area. Probably wasn't the best way to draw that. Try it again. And then this basically just swoops out this way and rolls into shadow along here. Pretty much all the rest of that is in shadow up in here, all the way down this way. This, again, did I copy the reference perfectly? No, but I understand the anatomy and kind of what is going on there and why. And that's kind of what I'm using to decipher that area. You know, so we get a little bit of brachioradialis sticking out, maybe some extensor carpi radialis longus. We get some flexors over on this side, a little bit of bone popping out maybe over here. You know, outside head of the tricep, which is, oh my gosh. It's a medial head, the long head, the short head. What's up?
I got a question for you, but
Okay.
whenever is a good time.
Oh, well, I was just trying to remember which head of the triceps on the outside. I want to say the short head. I might be wrong. I don't know. For some reason, I get long head and short head mixed up.
Do you
But
want me to look it up?
no.
Like, I'll be Jamie.
No, it'll be
Look
fine.
this thing up.
Yeah, because Joe Rogan can't be bothered to look up his own stuff.
Okay, so here's the question. This is from a little while ago.
Okay.
Someone asked, is a black eraser good for leaving a clean erasure on the paper without any residue?
Mm.
Do you have any used erasers? You can show them, like, how
So yeah, with the eraser thing, that's a good question, because I was doing a demo the other day. See if I can find it here. And this exact thing happened, which I think is what you're talking about. And it was that last demo I did. Hang on, one more page. Is this one. Right, and you can see there's this weird mark right in there, and that is exactly what you were talking about, which is I used, I think it was this one. I have this pile of old gross erasers over here. I won't show you because it's disgusting. But I was using this, and I did this, and it left like this gooey black mark like across the whole thing. And I was like, well, this is a part of the demo where we learn when your eraser is done and toast. And this one's bad, right? Like, and you can see when you kind of knead it, it stays dark. That's a bad sign, right? That's not good. And then once it gets kind of warm from your fingers and like holding it the whole time, it'll start to disintegrate and leave black goo on your paper. And nobody wants that in the middle of their drawing. So I swapped it out. This one is actually a new one, believe it or not. It looks really black, but you'll see when you knead it, it's actually not, right? Like, it's actually a pretty new eraser that just needs to be kneaded a little bit. And this one is actually relatively new and good and is good to go. It's not perfect because I have a lot of charcoal in my hands, so as I knead it, I'm just putting more on there. But as long as when you knead it, it ends up looking relatively decent like this, it's fine. If we want to see like a brand new one, I mean, it's more like this color. But literally, I'll use them basically until I go to erase something, and if your eraser leaves a mark on the paper, then you need a new eraser. That's kind of the rule. But typically when that happens is when you go to knead it and it doesn't turn to a lighter color. That's a bad sign. It's time for a new eraser, definitely. And then you'll end up kind of what I did up here is, I don't know, leaving a giant mark in the middle of your drawing that you can't erase. It's a demo I just shot earlier. Some of you may have already seen it. If you're in my fundamental head class, just know that I shot this demo. It's being uploaded right now. I think it'll be done about the time I'm done with the live stream, I think. Anyway, that's the idea. So we can keep going. Also drink a little bit more of this delicious Coca-Cola. So we need some shadow on the legs. All right, so we're gonna have shadow on the glute. And again, when you look at this area in the reference, like, it's not super clear exactly what's in shadow and what's not right in here. So we're gonna have to clarify it a little bit. Figure out what to do with that area. So it's pretty simple. It definitely starts back up around here, right? And we're gonna have a very, very soft edge. Like, this is an extremely rounded form. And that, you know, how round or not round something is, like how round or how angular, kind of dictates the edges of our form shadows. Cast shadows follow a separate set of rules, but for form shadows, with direct lighting at least, that's basically it. And yeah, so we're gonna have to come in here and just figure out, right? This kind of starts wrapping around. You gotta keep this really, really soft. Soft meaning basically just like a gradient. That's really all that refers to. Right, I think it keeps coming this direction. Kind of starts to pop up this way a little bit. But then it kind of doesn't. It kind of stops. And then starts to kind of pull back this direction. Right, and one thing I'm thinking about is, like, I know the glutes are kind of wrapping around, and then we get the IT band dropping down this way. So even though this isn't clear, I can kind of design that in here a little bit and say, like, okay, I know this is gonna kind of drop into that little IT band section, and then we get maybe some of the lateralis coming from like underneath there a tiny bit. You know, and get some of this like staggered effect in there. And then maybe our lateralis is going to be coming around this way. Well, that didn't work as well as I thought it would. Let's just push this whole thing this direction. I think that'll work better. But notice, we're really focusing on keeping these marks soft. Really, really soft. Right? This just kind of like fades out down here. Kind of links into there, and then this whole knee is pretty much in shadow down here. Whole lower leg or upper leg is in shadow. A lot of shadow. On this side then, we get a cast shadow from this glute over onto this one. So we're going to have like a little bit of a cast shadow running right through there. And then that is going to connect to our other glute. This is tricky now, right? So earlier I was saying to modify this to fit the perspective of the leg and to build up that cylindrical shape a little bit more and to help show that that leg is coming towards us a bit. But what's interesting is the shadow on this glute already does that. We don't have to really change that much at all. It's kind of like dropping around this way and then kind of doing this. Still want to keep it soft. It's a very soft, very rounded form. You know, but it sits kind of more like that a little bit. And I don't know, I think that's a good glute indication. A little bit of light right there. Which brings us down to here. This starts getting a little more complex for this area, right? So what's happening is we have a cast shadow down onto this part of the leg, and then we're getting form shadows down in this part of the leg. And we've got to get those to all kind of work together, right? So this is a little bit awkward, the shadow across here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bend it even more. I think it is bent a little bit. It's hard to tell, but I think we can just kind of push that shadow to help reveal the form of the calf a little bit more, right? Like, and it's a cast shadow, so I'm going to put a relatively hard edge there. But at the same time, to be honest, it probably shouldn't be that hard because it's being cast from a pretty long, or something pretty far away from it. And the farther a shadow is cast, the softer the edges are going to be. You know, that's kind of our cast shadow rules is the farther the shadow is cast, the softer the edges. And then the closer the cast shadow is to the object casting it, the harder the edge. Well, let's see here. We're going to have a little bit of calf. So now we're getting more into like our form shadows here. Kind of cutting around this way. Some of these construction lines. A bit harder edge underneath there maybe. The muscles on the side of the leg are really complicated. There's like the peroneus, I forget what it is, peroneus longus and peroneus brevis, I think. And they're kind of like one above the other, but then a tendon from one goes on top of the other, and it's kind of a mess, to be honest. In my opinion, simplifying the side of the leg is the way to go, because it can look really strange sometimes. Not bad. I don't know. It's okay. Could be better. But it's also not the worst. So let's say some of this is chair. And then we get the leg kind of popping out from the chair. right? So we got to show like, okay, now this is actually chair right in here doing this. And that. Something like that. That doesn't look good. I don't like that. That's what happens when you start copying too much. Because I looked at the reference and I was like, yeah, it kind of goes like this. And then I copied it, but I don't know, it looks weird. Part of the reason it looks weird is I don't have the chair and the leg lined up the same way as it is in the reference. It's a little bit different. So I'm just going to stick with what I had before. I think that works a lot better. Okay, this, I don't know. I'm not thrilled with this lower leg quite yet, but let's see if we can lighten this. Get a little bit of that shadow under the heel right here. Right, just a little bit. And then it kind of pops back out. Kind of makes like this like staggered type shape. Cuts across, hits this little bit of ankle bone. Kind of sticking out right there. This is where things are going to get tricky. Feet can be really challenging. Right, so we're going to get shadow kind of cutting across this way. And that's basically the end of the pad of the foot. And then all this out here is going to be toes. But man, don't know that I want to take the time to draw a whole bunch of toes right now. I'm teaching a foot class next term if anybody's interested. It's not that I can't draw toes. I can. They're just a little time consuming. Oops, that wasn't good. And in a live stream, I don't know. It seems weird to just get bogged down in drawing toes for a long time. I don't know that that's what people came here to see. That big toe on there. Probably enough for now. Then we just get the rest of this foot shape on here, right? Just kind of cuts back out. Pops kind of back out this way a little bit. Seems reasonably good for now. There's also a whole bunch of compression, kind of like up in this area. I don't know, we can add that later. That's good for now. So let's get some shadow on this other leg and then we should be pretty much good to go. So we've got two cast shadows up here, one from each glute and leg, right? So it's making kind of an awkward shape, to be honest, up in this area. So we gotta decide how much of that do we want to copy? And I would argue that doing the same thing we did here is going to be good to do to the same shadow that it's casting right around here. This one, I don't know. We'll see how that goes. But this one we can push this way, right? Kind of like that. This one might be good to get a little bit of this in here, right? To just kind of show that it's the glute casting that shadow and then immediately wrap it around this direction. Get a little bit softer down in here. You know, I think that works pretty well. Not seeing any shadow back in here, but we're definitely getting shadow out here. Right, so we're getting shadow from this foot across here, right, kind of wrapping around this way. And then we're seeing shadow on the bottom part of the calf here. Right, so we're picking up some really soft shadow here, and then a cast shadow cutting across this way. Right in there. And then that shadow kind of cuts across, follows down the soleus here, and basically just disappears behind the Achilles tendon right there. You know, pick up a little bit more shadow in here, where we're kind of seeing where the soleus is cutting through. And a little bit of bone and tendon kind of cutting through this way. And then across the calf, not the calf, sorry, the ankle, down this way, which our ankle bone I think actually needs to be a little bit higher still. Yeah, it seems a little better. All right, pick up a little bit of shadow on the ankle. And then from there, we basically just add the shadow on this foot, right? And that should be kind of where this foot comes to life a little bit more, right? We get shadow on the heel. Right, and then it kind of pops back out. I'm going to actually kind of modify it a little bit to fit the shape I had in there already, just to show the arch a little bit more. And then we get some toes and stuff out here. I don't know, doing various things. So that's basically it. A little bit of a cast shadow maybe down here. It's a little bit weird. Still plant it on the ground a little bit. Anyway, that's pretty much it. That is kind of what I wanted to do. And it is now done. The only thing that seems a little bit off to me maybe is this lower calf section feels a little bit short. If I'm going to be self-critiquing. But to be honest, there's no easy way to fix that because we'd have to shrink this foot, I think, a little bit. I think it's a little bit large. And bring the ankle down a little bit. I think it's fine. It reads fine for now. I think it's good enough. So, what time is it? 7:33. I'll try and draw a little bit of this chair if I can. It's always kind of tough to draw, to be honest. It's not that tough. Okay, so we've got that part of the chair, which pretty much lines up with this leg right about in here. I mean, you could just get a ruler out when you do this. I mean, don't feel like you actually have to freehand the whole thing. I do it because I think it's good practice and I just like doing it, but it's challenging for sure. All right, so we get one of those pieces. And back here, we're going to have one of these pieces. Not bad. This one's going to come out this way. Let's add that part down there. This part's going to go kind of this direction. And you'll notice that the way the chair lines up with this leg isn't exactly like it is in the reference either. And I'm not that worried about it, to be honest. Maybe I should be, but I'm not. Also, this back leg is not going to end up anywhere near where that is in the reference either. But again, it doesn't really matter. As long as the perspective is correct in the drawing, it doesn't really matter a whole lot if it matches the photo exactly. Another thing that's happening in the reference that I'm not doing in the drawing is the chair in the reference actually has the back legs angled a little bit, and I'm just kind of skipping that part. Wouldn't be that hard to do. I'm not entirely sure why I skipped it. I just didn't draw it that way. Not bad. Let's see if we can get this part on here. I know this probably isn't the most exciting thing to watch, but this is the part that's left. That's a good start, right? Now we got to figure out, like, okay, we've got this railing system back here. So we're going to have this part kind of coming up along this way. We're seeing the bottom part of it here. It's kind of thin. And there's like this section down here coming out this way a little bit more. Again, kind of seeing the bottom of it. Not bad. Do I want to take the time to put the little railings in there? I don't know if I want to do that right this second. I do want to put these lower parts in here because right now the chair feels very unstable. You know, it looks like it's about to collapse. That's because it doesn't have the supports. You know, so we've got to put those in. And they just follow right along here, basically. They're just going to sit kind of like across here. Right, and then it kind of connects into here. And then we just kind of erase this part back out. Same thing here. Now we just need to figure out, like, okay, we need to make sure these logically make sense and line up properly. So the next one's going to go this way. One feels a little bit low. It's okay though, I'm gonna leave it. Right, so suddenly that chair feels way more stable, right? Just with those two little pieces added on, you know? So then if we add these pieces down here, suddenly it's gonna get like way more stable. So we just kind of pick a height. I'm just guessing here. I'm just gonna pick a random height. And do this. All right, cuts across that way, across this way, back across here. right? Little cross beam for stability. Again, now way more stable. We only put one of them in. Do the same thing back here. We can, if we want to get really technical here about making sure everything aligns properly. Making sure our heights are correct. The other one's going to sit right back about there. Right, if you study perspective, that's called riding the rails. So I was told, at least when I took a perspective class back in the day. But it makes sense, because you're basically just using perspective to wrap all the way around the box and figure out how something aligns like on the other side of a thing. Yeah, not bad. Erase some of these construction lines back out. And there we go. That is pretty much it. Looks a little bit odd without these little rails back in here. Because like if you were to sit on it, it would feel weird. Like there'd be like a hole in the back. I don't really want to draw, but I probably should. Just do it real quick maybe. I'm just going to guess. I'm not really going to like take the time to really figure these out. I might make them a little bigger and put fewer of them. That might be a good solution. Or it'll end up like it is in the reference. I guess there's 3 in the reference, there's 3 here. So that worked out okay. Then we just got to go in here and design them out and figure out, give them a little bit of depth. Oh, that wasn't a good line. So you can see what I'm doing here. I'm just going in, just working out the perspective on each of these things. Just erasing the construction lines. Sorry, I'm looking at some of the comments. It says he meant like a black plastic eraser, similar to the Staedtler, or however you pronounce that. Staedtler? White plastic eraser, not the kneaded eraser. Are they good for cleaning pencil lines without harming the paper? Honestly, I've never used, I don't know if you're still watching or not, but as far as your eraser comment, I've never used one of those. I've never used a black plastic eraser before. I mean, I find it hard to believe they would sell an eraser that destroys the paper, but also there's a lot of bad art supplies out there, so I don't know. Maybe it's not that surprising. I've never used one. I usually use these kneaded erasers. If I'm drawing in graphite, I use these little white mono erasers, these things. But they're just white plastic. The white plastic is fine. I mean, I don't know why you would need the black plastic. I do actually, you know what? I do have a black plastic eraser, and it's part of like a clicky eraser thing. I don't know if I have it here though. But I do have one somewhere. But I've never really used it much, to be honest. I don't know why. Because it seemed kind of cool. It was called like had like a name like Sumo or something. I don't think it's here. I don't know. I mean, I don't think I need to show it to you because you already know what a black eraser looks like. So it sounds like you have one. But if that's what you have, if you're thinking that like clicky type eraser, usually for the clicky erasers, I'll use like this thing, which I can't read because I've used it so much the writing came off. Tough Stuff eraser stick. It has like these little white erasers in there. These work pretty well. I guess I can show it on here. And this is a little mono eraser. So like I would use a combination of these. And then I also have, if I'm doing graphite, I've got one of these. Hang on, I gotta get up to grab it. This thing's really cool. I don't even know if they make these anymore. Mine's probably like 20 years old at least, or more. I mean, I think I may have gotten this when I was like a teenager. I was trying to learn drafting, but it looks like this. It doesn't have any batteries in it because I don't use it much, but got all these little like refill things. This thing works really well. Yeah. Oh, here's one of the interesting. So here's one of the inserts for the black plastic eraser thing. This goes inside basically like a square one of these. And then this thing comes out and you can erase with it, but it seems fine. It doesn't seem to leave any marks. But this is just newsprint, so I don't know what type of paper you're using, but yeah, I think that would work. It works pretty well on here. But again, I don't know what brand you have. I don't know any of that stuff. So, and to be honest, I don't use these very often. I am going to be teaching a graphite class this term, so I'll be using more of them soon. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So we have run out of stuff to do. I mean, I guess I could render it, but to be honest, it would take a long time. I don't really want to. Also, it's been almost 2 hours, so I think we're pretty much done. Those feet look very Bridgman. Brickman. By chance, that's what you were thinking about? Nope, wasn't thinking about Bridgman at all, actually. I don't think I've ever studied Bridgman for feet. I don't know. To me, like, it makes sense because, like, what I'm really thinking of is basic shapes. Is really what it comes down to, and thinking of them as blocky type shapes and getting those blocks in the right position to read with the proper perspective, and then figuring out how to modify them to add like anatomy back on top of them. That's really what I'm doing. That's probably what Bridgman's doing too. For feet, back in my student days, I mean, I studied a little bit of Hogarth. He draws kind of cool feet. I liked them back then. I like them less now, but they're pretty cool. Hogarth, a little bit of Michael Hampton maybe, but to be honest, a few years ago when I was teaching a foot class, I went back and looked at that Hampton book, and I don't know. I liked it a lot when I was a student, and now I look at it and I'm like, oh, I would do this a lot differently. No offense to Michael Hampton. I mean, it's a cool book, but I don't know. It's just not my taste anymore, I guess. And I've tried to, I don't know, put my own spin on things, I guess, if I can. Yeah, anyway, that is the end. So thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it. I'm going to go eat the rest of my dinner now and finish drinking this delicious Coca-Cola.